The Sermon on the Mount begins with a series of statements people through the years have called Beatitudes, because the Greek word for Beatitudes means happy. And the message is, oh, how blessed and how happy is the person who finds these things in their life. And he begins with, oh, how happy or blessed is the person who is poor in spirit. Now, let me go ahead and read for context. I'm going to start back in Matthew chapter 4, verse 23, and I'm going to read up to this point so we can get an idea of what's happening. Matthew 4, verse 23, Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain, the demon-possessed, those having seizures, and the paralyzed, and he healed them. Large crowds from Galilee, the Decapolis, Jerusalem, Judea, and the region across the Jordan followed him. Now, when he saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, if you read these words of Jesus as the great physician who begins to prescribe the way of life and what will make your life blessed, what you don't expect him to say is, "Blessed are the poor." That just runs contrary to everything we've ever heard. Common wisdom is not, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." If you were to say to someone, "Give me the secrets for a happy life," they might very well begin to tell you where to invest your money, what city to live in, what kind of job to get, who to marry, how many children to have, what kind of dog to have in your backyard. They'll give you all kinds of stuff, but they won't give you this. We've all seen in our lives, in the tabloids and on the news, very successful and powerful people fall into substance abuse and very destructive lifestyles, and they end up dying as a result of that. And we say, "What's wrong with these people? They have everything they could ever want." The answer is really quite simple. Most people are sustained in their drive in life believing that if they get a little further ahead, they're going to be happy. If I could just attain to that goal, or that plan, or that position, then I'm going to find great joy. If I could just party a little harder than the next person, then I'll find real life. As I saw an interview with Joe Walsh when he was talking about his alcoholism. He said, I used to think, when the alcohol wasn't working anymore, he said, "I'm just not drinking enough." And he discovered that was absolutely not true. So they are driven to true happiness and the pursuits of life, believing it lay just out of their reach. Until you look at the few who actually arrive there, having everything you could ever dream of, have all beyond their wildest imaginations, only to discover their chagrin that happiness isn't waiting for them. So despair sets in because the pot at the end of the rainbow is empty. I thought it would be there, and it's not. When Solomon went running after things in this life because he was as wealthy and powerful as anyone had ever been, and he had the time and the money to pursue them with great vigor, he wrote this in Ecclesiastes 5, verse 10. "Whoever loves money never has money enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with his income. This too is meaningless." Solomon says there is no reward down that road. On the other hand, God constantly attaches blessing in real life to our relationship with him. Luke 11, verse 28, he replied, "Blessed, rather, are those who hear the word of God and obey it." Romans 4, verse 7, "Blessed are they whose transgressions are forgiven, whose sins are covered. Blessed is the man whose sin the Lord will never count against him." James 1, verse 12, "Blessed is the man who perseveres under trial, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him." All the same word. Oh, how happy is that person who is in a right relationship with God. Now, this word "blessed" that Jesus begins with here in Matthew 5 and verse 3 is a Greek word that speaks about a joy that is fixed. and it is not dependent on external circumstances. In other words, if you lose your job, that joy doesn't go with it. If your kids aren't doing as well as you think they should, that joy can't be touched by that disappointment. It doesn't mean happy. It means a settled joy that is the outgrowth of the place you have with God. Most of the world looks at happiness and immediately attaches it to circumstances. Hey, my car's paid off. Couldn't be happier. 3-day weekend. Couldn't be more thrilled. 2 weeks off without that crazy boss of mine. The word happy has its root in the English word hap, which means chance. There's a word we use from time to time, happenstance. What a lucky break. I really lucked out. That's not what this word means. Jesus in every place uses the word blessed, or blessed, however you want to say it, to speak of a joy that is the condition of the heart before God. And his first definition of how you can have real life is the place that you begin before you become a Christian. But it is the place you must remain as long as you live. Blessed are those who come to the place where they understand that they are poor in spirit, for then they will have the kingdom of heaven. There are two main Greek words for the word poor. The first one is the Greek word penes. It refers to the person who doesn't have much left, who lives from paycheck to paycheck. They don't have more than enough, but they have enough. They get by, but there's no extra. The second word, patokos, in the Greek, means that you are in abject poverty. It is a far worse condition, referring to the person who is reduced to begging to survive. Excuse me. It refers to the person who is reduced to begging to survive because they don't have enough to get by today. It is that oppressive kind of poverty that leaves you hopeless, puts you on your knees, and brings you to the end of yourself. And as you might suspect, that is the word that the Lord uses here. Oh, how happy the person that realizes he or she has nothing to offer to God in regard to their spiritual well-being. Not, I'll get by this week. This person has nothing. As a matter of fact, you could call this lesson, I've got nothing. Because when God says to this person, why should I let you into my heaven? This person turns their pockets inside out and they say, I've got nothing. Truly happy is the person who realizes they are absolutely destitute and without hope in their spiritual standing before God. Commentator Harry Ironside, a commentator from the early and middle part of the 20th century, wrote this: man's extremities are God's opportunities. Man's extremities are God's opportunities. And that is absolutely the case here when it comes to salvation. You and I will never be saved while we still have an idea of how we might be saved. You say, what do you mean? Well, let's talk about it. While you've still got something to offer to the Lord, while there's still something in your back pocket or squeezed in your hand, there's some stuff I'm going to go show the Lord, and I'm sure he'll let me in when he sees that. I know stuff. I've done stuff. I've been places. I've tried things. He knows my intentions. Wait till you see what I'm going to give to the Lord. You'll never be saved that way. The person today who says Jesus may be one way to heaven, but there are many ways. We may be on different paths, but they all lead to the same destination. That person has no clue of what it means to be poor in spirit. Blessed is the person who has nothing to offer, who stands before the Lord out of ideas, who can't trust in their abilities, who has no argument left for their own well-being. They just stand before the Lord flat, broke. When the Lord says, why should I let you into my heaven? This is the man or woman who turns their pockets inside out and says, I don't know. Because I don't know I don't have what it takes. I'm not able to bring you anything, God. I don't have what you're looking for. I don't have what I need. Abject spiritual poverty. And Jesus says, blessed is that condition. Why? Because at that point, you then realize that you've got to look outside of yourself for help. It is then that the gospel of Jesus Christ begins to make sense. Jesus now begins to become more attractive. He did what for me? He'll do what if I look to him? He'll get me where? Oh yeah, I'm in. High five. Give me the Bible. I'm signing up today. Jesus says theirs is the kingdom of heaven. But until I come to the end of me, there's really nothing else the Lord can do. The first step in salvation is to look at your gas gauge, your spiritual gas gauge, and seeing that you're on empty. Now, the later Beatitudes will fill you up. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. But first, you got to realize that you're empty. The gospel always convicts before it converts. As Jeremiah began his ministry, God said to Jeremiah in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 10, "See, today I appoint you over nations and kingdoms to uproot and tear down, to destroy and overthrow, to build and to plant." That uprooting and tearing down, the destroying and overthrowing came before the building and the planting. God will take us down before he builds us up. This poverty of spirit is not the result of a smart and intelligent person. This isn't the result of someone looking over their life and saying, I've come to the decision that I can't do it. This is always the result of the work of God in your life. He brings you to a place where you begin to realize that you don't have what it takes, because the natural heart of a man or woman is always to be very self-satisfied. No one will run to their defense quicker than a man runs to his own defense. We have this audacity to think that God somehow owes us something for our goodness. We pray this way: "Oh Lord, you know that I've been more faithful than that guy over there. You know that how hard I've been trying, and oh man, I think I'm ready to cash in now. Here's my coupons." As if the Lord will go, "Well, all right, way to go. Here's your blessings, your Cupid doll, and your stuffed animal. There you go. Come see us again." That's the natural person. This poverty of spirit is the work of God's Spirit in us. Jesus said to the Pharisees in Luke chapter 16, verse 15, "You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of men, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight." We pat each other on the back. You're the citizen of the year, the best kid in the class, employee of the month. We like rewards. Yet in order to become a Christian, you got to come empty. You've got to come empty. That levels the playing field for all of us, see? In order to be saved, we've got to be found wanting. And that accomplishes by his Spirit. When Jacob was coming home after spending years with Laban, his uncle, after being crooked with him, and they one-upped each other for years, he left on very bad terms. And basically the last words he heard were, "You come back here and you're mine." He turned to go home, only to hear that Esau was coming out with a huge greeting party, a brother he had ripped off and who he was sure was coming to kill him. Genesis 32, verse 22. Jacob crosses over the Jabbok River the night before he was to meet his brother. The word Jabbok has several meanings, but one of the most prominent is emptying or pouring out. Jacob, the guy who always lived by the seat of his pants, whose name meant heel catcher, who always got by his wits, was now in a position where he had no place to turn. He couldn't go forward. He couldn't go backward. He had run out of ideas. He had a huge family and children, and they were all sitting ducks for a brother that he believed was coming for him with as much anger as he could imagine. And Jacob spends the night wrestling with the angel of God. And through tears, he cries out to the Lord to bless him. He says, "I won't let you go until you bless me." He had nowhere else to turn. He was desperate. He was empty. And the Lord said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob. I catch heels for a living. I work things out." And the Lord said, "No more. Now you will be called Israel, governed by God." Wow. Jacob calls the place Penuel, which means to come face to face with God. He crosses the emptying river. He comes face to face with God, and he now goes forward with a new name. I'm being governed by God. That is where the blessing is. To be blessed, you have to come to the end of yourself. These words, poverty of spirit, defines your attitude towards yourself once you've come face to face with God. It is the blessed condition of being hopeless in terms of your spiritual standing, of being bankrupt, of having no hope, of believing that there is nothing you could do or bring that would bring you to a place where God might indeed receive you. You quit looking for answers with you. You quit coming up with solutions for yourself. All you can do is look to God and hope He means it and embrace His solution. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And you know, the exact opposite is found in our world. The person in the world is self-assured, self-reliant, a self-made person, and the world applauds people like that. They started with nothing, they came from poverty, and look what they've done for themselves. We always hate people who inherit money, those starlets who've never worked a day in their lives and yet spend millions of dollars and make fools of themselves. Idiots, we call them. But the person who is self-made, we applaud. That's the way the world works. But you cannot be a self-made person when it comes to the Lord. You must be empty. Blessed are the spiritually impoverished. True happiness is found in the opposite of that independent, defiant attitude which refuses to bow the knee before the Lord. This conscious awareness of my emptiness is a work of God's Spirit. If you're aware of that, you shouldn't be too hard on yourself. It is a blessing to know that you haven't got what it takes. It isn't just to save you. You got to stay in that position the rest of your life so that you don't run off without the Lord. The Apostle Paul thought that he had things together pretty well. When he was Saul of Tarsus, he had been fighting the conviction of God's Spirit for some time. And in Acts chapter 9, when he ended up face down in the dust outside of Damascus, he finally said, "Who are you, Lord?" And the answer came, "I'm Jesus, whom you have been persecuting. It's been hard for you, hasn't it," as the New King James reads, "to kick against the goads of your conscience." It seems that every person in the Bible that comes to be aware of who God is also brought dramatically to the point of being aware of who they are. The experience seems to be common throughout the Bible. Luke chapter 5. Peter had been fishing all night with his buddies and hadn't caught anything. Jesus comes along after doing some teaching and he says, "Great day for fishing. Put your nets out for a catch." And you could see Peter and Andrew going, "Dude, you stick to teaching, we'll stick to fishing. Deal?" So Peter thinks he's humoring Jesus by putting the nets out. But as soon as he does, Luke says they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. And they called their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. Peter looked at the fish, then he looked at Jesus, then he looked at the fish, then he looked at Jesus, and it dawned on Peter who Jesus is. And in the middle of this lake in which he had made his living for so long, he fell at Jesus' knees and he said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." Luke says that Peter and all his partners were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. No wonder Jesus responded to Peter, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will catch people." Jesus had a mission for Peter and for us that he would only be ready to accept when he was poor in spirit. The world will offer classes in assertiveness training, but the Bible will bring us before God fully aware of our lack of ability to please Him. Yet, it is that very condition that leads to spiritual life. It is that condition that will keep you dependent on the Lord, realizing you can't do anything without Him, and yet with Him you can do all things. I heard of a preacher that admired the teachings of a fellow minister, so he called him up and asked him to speak at his church. And the preacher, turned author, said this, "I'm sorry, but I'm not taking any speaking engagements for under $10,000 these days." And the first preacher said, "Well, I can help you with that. This will be one less that you will be doing." He thought to himself, who does this guy think he is? When he was nothing, God used him. Now that he is something, he's forgotten that he is nothing. He told him that, and the author hung up the phone. The rest of this verse says, "For theirs is the kingdom of heaven." The benefit of coming to the end of myself is that I turn to the Lord for help. Isaiah 66 and verse 2 says, God says, "This is the one I esteem, he who is humble and contrite in spirit and trembles at my word." So, How do you see yourself today? Are your pockets turned inside out when you pray? Or do you come clutching some of your accomplishments and say, Lord, answer my prayer. Check this out. Look what I've done for you. I've earned favor here. You owe me. No, he doesn't. You don't even get in without him. But blessed are you if you can come to that understanding about you. Then God can begin to work. Maybe you're not truly blessed yet. God can take you and fill your life. You just have to go to Jesus and hang on to him. If you're not willing to let go of it all so that God can be God in your life, remember that this is the place where true joy begins. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Declare spiritual bankruptcy. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you again next time.